Hello, hello, hello. Happy Friday, everybody. Good to see we got a nice crowd already here waiting. 25 people. That's awesome. I'm excited about that. I'll give it here just a minute. If y'all would let me know if you can hear me and see me okay, that would be really helpful. This stream delay is always something fun to contend with, but it looks like everything on my end is working and the stream actually went to the right place, which would be awesome. What's up, Adam, Muhammad, Sharon? Good to see y'all. You hear me. Excellent. Excellent. Sweet. I'm excited about this. We got a lot to go over. I did a bit of a dry run this morning just to make sure that I had all my systems and everything in place. Good thing I did. I found 4 or 5 little things. So I'm like, I should probably tweak that now. So glad I went through that, but it ended up taking me an hour to do it without explaining anything. So I'm guessing this is going to be a fairly long stream. I've got water here along with a full gallon jug of water. I've been sick, so I also have cough drops here. So you'll have to excuse me if I have to go on mute and have a coughing fit. It's just something I've been going through. So hopefully not. Hopefully the cough drops will keep it under control. But awesome. Well, I'm glad to see everybody here. I would love to know in the chat while we're getting warmed up here, what are you guys hoping to learn or hoping to get out of today's call? It would be very interesting. Probably something I should have asked weeks ago instead of moments before we start and derail everything. But sweet. All right, let me see here. We'll get my screen shared here. I'm going to put myself in this bottom corner down here, and hopefully I'll stay out of the way of stuff. That was my fear, is that I would get in the way. Typography setup. Excellent. I got a couple little tricks up my sleeve on that, so that's a good one. What's up, Leonardo? Good to see you here. All right, so I will StreamYard, which is what I'm using to stream here. It allows me a couple different layouts here. This one makes sure I don't cover up the screen, but it makes the screen so much smaller. So I'm going to try to go with this one here. And if I get in the way of anything, just yell at me in the chat here. I'm going to try to keep an eye on that chat so I can see what's going on, and yell at me if I'm covering anything up. And I'll do my best to be conscious of that, because I can always just go completely off screen here as well. So we'll see how that works. All right, excellent. So we got a big thing to tackle today. So we're going to be building a starter site out completely from scratch. These are all my notes here. This is just to keep me going throughout this live stream. So you'll probably see me looking over here at my other screen as I go through this process. I want to make sure I don't leave anything out. But we are starting completely from scratch, a completely blank website. My hope is you'll be able to use this to follow along, take some of these tips and tricks. We'll talk about at the end how I can share some of these things. So I want to share some of the stuff that's in my child theme, some of these GeneratePress and GenerateBlocks settings, global styles, all that. So at the end of the stream, I'll talk about how we can do all that. But honestly, everybody's setup is going to be a little bit different. You're not going to love the way I do everything, just like I don't love the way people do all their setups. So the idea here is to get some ideas, see how I set things up, and then you can go through and build out your own starter site. Obviously, having a starter site to start out with makes a huge difference just in terms of getting up and running quickly, not having to repeat the same work over and over on every website. Now, my starter site from last year, I built a ton of things into it. It was probably the most complex one I had ever made. But what I found throughout the year making websites is every time I would clone that to start a new project, I would have to go in there and undo a whole lot of stuff that was already set up inside my starter site. And that felt just as cumbersome as having to start it from the beginning and set it all up for the first time. So what I've tried to do in this year's iteration of my starter site is to really only set up the things that I know I'm going to need on 99% of the websites I'm using, and kind of just lay the groundwork for all the other things I'm going to have to add on a site-by-site basis. So you'll see in here, for example, Adam mentioned the typography system. I will show you kind of how I set some of that up, and I'm gonna kind of take a break at that point and show you how I would actually go about this in a in a site specific setting. But I'm not actually baking all that into my starter site because I'm doing designs in Figma, and it just doesn't line up perfectly where I can just plug this into a starter site. I need to set up all those things kind of custom for every project. So there'll be some things like that, and I'll try to mention when all those things happen. But let's get started here. I'm going to build all this on InstaWP. So this is my InstaWP account here. we'll just add a new site. We're going to start completely from scratch. So we're going to say starter site demo live stream, just so I can keep track of it. Next step, create site. We'll give it just a couple seconds here, and InstaWP will have us an install ready to go pretty quickly. And just like that, we're good to go. All right, let me pull up my notes here. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is just get all my default plugins installed. I see that we have an update automatically available. It looks like 6.8.1 is not in InstaWP's configuration, so we'll get that set up. And let's go into our plugins. We don't have any plugins in there yet, so we need to set all that up. So I'm gonna install a few from the repo and then a few premium ones that I've gone ahead and downloaded. We'll do GenerateBlocks first here. Go ahead and install that and activate it. Looks like we're at version 2.1.0 at this point. I also have the premium version, which I've uploaded into a folder here. So GenerateBlocks Pro 2.1.0. Get that installed and activated. I won't bother going in and putting in my license keys right now just because it would take extra time. I think for advanced custom fields, we will have to do that. But let's see. We got GeneratePress Premium. We'll go ahead and install that. Even though we hadn't installed the theme yet, it might nag us about that. But we'll go ahead and get that installed. We got WS Form Pro, which is another Pro plugin. So we're going to go ahead and install and activate that. Greg, I wouldn't even be able to tell you how to build using the free version of GenerateBlocks because I never ever use free GeneratePress or free GenerateBlocks. Happy to pay for those things because they do so much for me. So honestly, when people ask, is this in the free or pro? I honestly never know because I always just install the pro one. So I'm not really sure what's included in which version. All right, so we got GenerateBlocks, GenerateBlocks Pro, GP Premium, WS Form Pro. Let's go ahead and add some more of these free ones. So Postmark is what I use for my transactional email. I like building this into my starter site because once you connect your API and get everything set up, when you clone this install, it clones all those connections as well. So all of your transactional email works right out of the box inside your starter site, which is just one less thing you have to set up. We got the block visibility plugin. This has definitely earned a spot in my starter site because I use it for so many things now. We got short pixel, which won't be that helpful here in the demo, but this is what I use to optimize all my images. It will just optimize them as we upload them. In fact, I need to make a note in here when we're tidying up all these plugins. We need to go into short pixel and do a little bit of configuration. Short pixel. I didn't catch that when I did this earlier, but definitely want to do that. Plugins, add plugin. This is kind of freaking out on me here. Then we have WP SVG images. This will allow us to upload SVGs. There's several of these. I'm just using the one that's by Short Pixel just because I'm already using a Short Pixel product. So keep that all in the same family there. But I think any of those do about the same. Let's see, we got accessibility checker. This is another great one just to make sure you're taking care of accessibility stuff as you go. I do have a video on my channel. Amber, who's one of the founders of this plugin, walked us through exactly how to use it. So there is a video on our channel if you want to check that out. And then we got two more premium ones here. So one is Perf Matters. Go ahead and install that. Right now we're at version 2.4.4, which I think just came out last week. And then last one we're going to install in here is Advanced Custom Fields. Go ahead and install that. I know it's going to nag us to put in our license for that one before we can actually really use it. So I'll have to go off screen for that for a minute and get my license put in there. All right, activated. Excellent. Okay, so those are all the plugins there that I use inside of my starter site. We now need to go get GeneratePress set up. So we'll go in here and add a theme. Look, GeneratePress is right here. It used to be so far down, I just searched for it, but now it's right here at the top. So what, number 10 there? Excellent. And then I use a child theme for all this. So I just typically download the blank child theme and then customize it as I need. We'll do a bunch of those customizations here. But if we just search for GeneratePress child theme, This first result here will get you to it, and this is the link to it. So we can go ahead and download that. I'll save it inside that same file. Toby asked a question here about what is your transactional email from email address configured? I have like a development domain that I use for all my projects. It's like ogle.dev. So I set up that transactional email to just use that, that email address. It's not ideal for once we have it on a client site. Usually I'll connect their stuff in there, but at least everything's working and it's coming from an email address I own and have access to. So that's good enough for me. So I'll just set it up with that. All right, so we got our child theme downloaded. Let's go in here and add a new theme. We'll upload a theme and we'll go in here to our GeneratePress child, install that, and we'll go ahead and activate it as well. And we can get rid of the default 2025 theme. So we'll go ahead and delete that. All right, so now we need to start setting up some of the settings inside GeneratePress. So to do that, I'm going to go in here under Appearance and GeneratePress. And here's where we can activate a bunch of the modules. So the ones I always activate here are the Disable Elements feature, the Elements feature. We need the Font Library, Menu Plus, which is going to allow us to do the off-canvas menu that I like, and then the spacing module here, which will allow us to essentially get rid of some of the spacing that GeneratePress comes with, because I'm actually going to take care of all of that with GenerateBlocks. Okay, so again, that's Disable Elements, Elements, Font Library, Secondary Nav, and Site Library. All right, so let's jump in here next and start working on our customizer settings. All right, we'll just start at the top and work our way down. So site identity, I'll usually go ahead and hide the site title because we're going to probably put in a client logo anyways. I'm not going to bother uploading a logo. We'll just do that once we're actually working on a client site. So that's all we need to do inside the site identity. However, here in layout, we're going to spend quite a bit of time in here. So we'll jump in here in under container. All of this is probably going to depend on a site-by-site basis, but I almost always start out my designs with a content width or container width here of 1280 pixels. So I'll just bake that into my starter site. That's usually where I want to start out anyways, and then I can adjust it if I ever need to. Separating space, I get rid of that. Content separator, get rid of that as well. These things are coming from the GeneratePress theme. If you were just building it without any kind of builder, like we're going to be using GenerateBlocks to build an entire website. So I just like to zero those out so they're not messing with any of my spacing or anything on here. Under the content layout, I change this to one container, and then the container alignment, I can just leave that as text. Now the content padding here, again, this is coming from like the theme settings. If we were just using the theme to build the site, I'm going to zero those completely out. We'll just delete them. In fact, we might have to put 0 in them. I'm going to go ahead and delete or zero them out for both the desktop and mobile versions. That obviously doesn't look good here, but any content I add to this website, I'm going to be adding it using GenerateBlocks. So no real need to do that here inside GeneratePress. All right, so under the header settings, which are next, the header width is full and the inner header width is contained. So if we went back to our desktop version here, we don't have a logo here, but the logo would stop here and the menu would stop over here. That's typically how I'm setting up my designs, but if we ever need to change that, we could change that inner width to full and it will poke out all the way to the edges. So I'll just leave it at contained. Header alignment to left is good. And then the header padding, this is one of those that's kind of hard to explain, but let me see if I can do it here. This is a bit of a side tangent, but the way GeneratePress theme handles the padding for this, if we go into our header here and I'm inspecting, we have our header here, then inside of it, we have essentially our wrapper, right? So this is the inner container. GeneratePress puts all the padding on this inner container. We can see it down here, this inside header, 20 pixels and 40 pixels. Actually like all that padding to go on the outer container, so like the entire section. So what this does here with this header padding, it's actually putting it on this inside container, and because I'm using my sections to add all the padding and not that inner container, I end up having the header not match up with everything I'm building inside GenerateBlocks. So for this header padding, I will go ahead and add some top and bottom padding. So we'll put that at 16 pixels for the top, but the left and right, I'm going to go ahead and zero out. So we'll go in here into our mobile settings as well. Maybe make that 8 on the top and then 0 on right, 8 top, 0 on left. So that will just zero out that left and right. And you'll see later when we go in and put some of the CSS we need for our starter site or for our child theme, we'll fix that to where we have accurate padding on that header. All right, perfect. That takes care of our header. We'll go in here next to our primary navigation. So mobile breakpoint is the first thing I changed. By default, GeneratePress has this set to only go to our hamburger menu on mobile. I find most of the time my menu is too big to show the full menu on tablet. So I'll just go ahead and change this to 1024, which is the breakpoint for tablet inside GeneratePress. That way we get to our hamburger menu when we get here to our tablet version instead of all the way down to our mobile version. And then here's one, let's see. This is navigation dropdown. So this is, again, something that's going to be easier to demo. In fact, let's make a note and come back and talk about this later. I'm going to put some CSS into the child theme that's going to make all of this make sense. But for accessibility purposes, this really should be set to click arrow. Now, I can't demonstrate this right now because I don't have any drop downs. But when you're tabbing through a site using your keyboard to navigate, if you don't set this to click arrow, if you have a bunch of drop downs, as people are tabbing through, they'll have to tab through each one of those drop down menus. So let's say you had 5 things here and 3 of them had drop downs and somebody just wanted to get to the last thing, which was contact us. If they were tabbing through, they would have to tab through each one of those drop downs in order to get all the way to the last button there that they're trying to click. And the click arrow means that it won't open those drop downs until somebody enters into that drop down, which is just a much better setup for accessibility. So we're going to set this to click arrow, and then I'm going to use some CSS to make it a little bit easier for people who are using a mouse. When they hover over those drop downs, it will go ahead and drop that down. So we'll come back to that and try to talk about that once we add that CSS in here. All right, so for our menu item width, I use an 8-point grid, 8-pixel grid. So I'm going to change that from 20 to 24 just so it lines up on my grid there. Menu height, I'm going to change that down to 40. By default, this is the padding that goes inside the link inside of your navigation. 60 just feels too tall for me, so I'll go with 40, and that's good enough for me. And then we'll leave the submenu height and the submenu width just where they are. Hey, Shanda, good to see you here. All right, so that takes care of all of our primary navigation. Now we get to our off-canvas panel. So I like using this off-canvas panel on mobile only. Now, because we put our mobile menu on tablet, it's going to work on tablet as well. But this is the slide-in menu here. My colors aren't set up, so it's blank at the moment. But I do like to slide that in from the right. So if we turn that on, that little mobile menu will just slide in. I prefer this option. This is totally a design preference thing. But if we turn that off, and now if we use our mobile menu, it does a little drop-down thing. I just don't like that as much because it shifts the content around the page. So I go with mobile only, make sure that this is set to the side of right, and then that will make sure it just pokes out this right side. I just figure if somebody's using their hand to click on that right side, I want the menu to be on the right side too, so they're not having to use both hands in order to do that. All right, so that takes care of that. And now we get into colors, which this gets super, super complicated here. So I'm going to show you how I set this up. I have kind of a default color palette that I start with for most projects when I'm inside Figma. It's kind of the color palette that I find myself using the most. Now, whether or not I'm going to put this into my child theme, I keep going back and back, or into my starter site, I kind of keep going back and forth on. But I definitely like getting rid of these default GeneratePress colors because it doesn't use the naming convention I like. And I don't know, it's just not my setup. So I will just go ahead and go through here and delete all of these. Now, typically what I do is set up a color palette that has a range of neutrals. So we have a lot of grays from light gray to very, very dark gray, kind of a gradient of those. And then we have a brand color and a variation of that brand color. So if we're using the brand color for our links, let's say, I need a darker or lighter version of that for when we hover over it. And then a secondary brand color. Some brands have multiple colors, some don't. But a lot of times I find myself needing that secondary color. So that's kind of how I set this up. Now, we could waste a bunch of time in here going in and adding these colors and saying, you know, neutral 0 and putting in FFF for white and do these one by one. But we've got an easier way to shortcut that. So I'm just going to shortcut that here. So Taylor Drayson, if you guys don't know him, he is awesome. I'll make sure to include this link in all my resources as well. he's created this little generator here that will actually give you an export file where you can just import all of your colors. So I went ahead and just created a file based on these instructions in this video. So I can just import my color palette just to save us time here inside the live stream. So I'm going to go ahead and jump out of the customizer here. We'll go into GeneratePress. Down here at the bottom, we have this import option. I'll go ahead and choose file. And then I have my GP color palette that I exported from that site you just saw. So we'll go ahead and import that here. Say OK. And now when we go back into the customizer and under colors, all the colors have been added. So I didn't do anything that we couldn't have done just by adding all these individually, but they're all added in one shot, which is definitely helpful. So the way my color palette works is I have, like I said, a set of neutral colors. This goes from pure white, which is my neutral 0, all the way to pure black, which is neutral 1000. I do find I need a few more on the edges. So here, when we're close to white, I do have a 50, and then it goes to 100, 200, 300, 400, all the way till we get to 900 here. And then I need a couple more on the edges again. So I have a 950 and then a 1000, which is pure black. Then after that, like I said, we have our brand primary alt, so the alternate version of our brand color. We have our brand secondary color, and then our brand secondary alt. So this is kind of my default starting place for color palettes. Like I said, this is one of those things I've gone back and forth on, because when I get into Figma and start designing something, sometimes I'll use this. Sometimes I just start designing stuff and I end up with some kind of bespoke color palette that doesn't follow this convention. So sometimes I end up having to delete all these out, and I wonder if this is something I should bake in or not. I am going to go ahead and bake it in on this one, especially because we can set up some of these global colors for our website. All right, so we're going to go through the process of setting up what all I would define here inside of GeneratePress. Some of this I'd rather do inside GenerateBlocks or even inside of my style sheet. But in here, we can go into the body, and I'm going to set the background as my neutral 50. I like to do the background of my website just a hair off white if I'm doing light mode, or if I was doing a dark mode site, I'd probably go with 950 here and be just a hair off of being pure black. Almost hard to see. Maybe I'd go with 900. Don't know how well that comes across on the live stream. But this way, if I ever need something lighter, I can still use white on top of this light gray color, which tends to work pretty nicely. For my text, I'm going to go with my brand 700, which is right here, or my neutral 700, excuse me. For the links, I'm going to go with my brand primary for the natural link color, and then for the hover color, I'll use that brand alt. That way I'm using two colors in the same hue, but different shades of them. These ones aren't too far off from each other. We might want to go with something more contrast between those, but this will be good enough for now. All right, so I will set those here inside my body. I'm going to skip over the top bar because I don't use the top bar inside GeneratePress. And we'll go inside of our header here. Excuse me 1 second while I get a drink. All right, so for the background, typically I'm matching this to the background of my site, but of course, if your design has a different header color, you could set that here. Again, for the text, I'm going to go with the 700. For the links, now these aren't your navigation links here. That can be a bit confusing. These are links that are in your header, like if you had a link inside your sub headline or something. I'm just going to go ahead and set these to the 700 and then maybe like the 900 on hover. I'm probably not even going to use those, but I'll put them in here. I'm typically not using the site title or the site tagline, so we'll just leave those the way they are. All right, so next is our primary navigation, which is this next drop down here. I'm going to go ahead and close these so they're not confusing us. All right, so most of the time I do not want a background on my navigation, so I'm just going to go in here and set these to be the same color as my header. You could also make them transparent. Either one works fine. For the navigation text, this will affect my links up here, so we can see if I change this to yellow, it's going to change those to yellow. A lot of times I go with the same color as my body text and then just a darker color on hover. So we're going to set that up to be my 700 for the normal link color and then the 900 for the hover color. Submenu background, again, I'm usually just matching that to my body background here, and then I'll do the links the same color, the 700 for the links and then the 900 for the hover and active. Again, we can change that on a site-by-site basis, not a big deal. All right, next is the off-canvas panel. So again, I usually go with that same background color here as the body of my website. We can change all this. Kind of sound like a broken record at this point, but I am just repeating myself at this point. So we'll change all this here to our natural background colors and then the color for all of our links in our menu, just so everything matches nicely. All right, have I lost anyone? Hopefully not. We've got a nice little crowd here, 50 people watching us, which is excellent. All right, so let's see. Next up is our content. So inside this content here, this is something that tripped me up for a long time, and I see support tickets about this on the forum all the time, or people posting in the GeneratePress community about this. If you set your link colors here in the content, let's say we just set this to like our brand colors. If we set these right here, it is very difficult to override those inside GenerateBlocks. So I typically do not set those here inside the content. We'll just default these out, which just puts them back to transparent. I did set those link colors here inside the body, but if you set them here inside the content, they become really hard to override. So I would just suggest leaving those completely blank. What I will go in here and do is the content titles, the archive content titles. We'll go, excuse me, I knew that cough was going to come. Apologies. I'll try to mute myself if I can catch it quick enough. I will set these to something inside of my palette, usually the 700 here. Sometimes these are coming in by the theme itself and not something I'm adding inside GenerateBlocks. So I just like to have some kind of sensible default for all those. Same thing with my heading colors. Usually I'm going to go with kind of a text color. Oftentimes it'd be darker. So maybe I go with the 900 for all the headings and leave the 700 for the body copy, just so there's some contrast between them. But I do find it's helpful to go ahead and set these colors inside the customizer here, just so as we add things with GenerateBlocks, it's already all kind of defaulted to the way we need it to be. All right, that is it for the colors here. Let's see, did Taylor's tool populate the global colors or the entire drop-down section? All it did was pop all these colors as swatches in here, and then you have to go fill those out just like we did, just like we went through right now. So his little importer will bring them in here, but you still have to go assign them to whatever they need to be. But the way you set up that importer, you can name those colors. So you can see they came in with names of neutral 500 and then the hex value here. His tool here, I think I closed it. So let's open it back up. His tool here, you can actually set it up from your Figma file. You can set up using coolers, which I know a lot of people use for their colors, or if you use the core framework here, you can use that. You can also just paste everything in here. I think I ended up just pasting all my values in here. So either of those work, but it's a super handy tool to save some time, because going through and adding all those colors manually is a pain in the butt. All right, so I think that takes care of all of our colors, and now we get to the typography section. So Adam, time to perk up if you're not still here. All right, so this is one of those things where I'm not doing a whole lot of this inside of my starter site. I want to control this on the individual site basis. What I found last year when I baked all of this into my starter site is that every time I would go design a site inside Figma, and then I would start my install, I would have to go undo so many things that were inside my starter site to get my typography working, that now I'm just trying to set up the baseline here. So I'm going to show you what I set up as kind of that baseline, and then I'm going to walk you through how I go about actually setting up typography as well, even though I'm not going to bake it into the starter site here. So when we turned on the font manager inside of the GeneratePress settings earlier, we still have the option here to add fonts inside the customizer. I would recommend you don't do that. We'll actually go ahead and publish all the changes we made here and jump out of the customizer for this. And we'll go into the font library, which is what we turned on. This system for managing fonts is it's the newer system, and you have a lot more control over everything. We're just in this confusing period still with GeneratePress where there's two different ways to do this. This is the way you want to do it for sure. So I'm going to go ahead and just set up a couple fonts in here. Like I said, I probably would not build these into my starter site, but once I, clone this site and start actually building, this is the process I would go through to install those fonts. So I'm just going to use Google Fonts for this, and we'll go ahead and install a nice serif font for our headlines. We'll go back here and we'll just do enter maybe for our body copy. So I'll do 400, 600, 800, skipping a font weight in between these just so there's enough contrast between them. And we'll jump in and grab our italic ones as well. Now, the one thing I do differently, and I've just started doing, was going back in here into the font library. Then if you open up this font setting and go to advanced options and scroll down to the bottom, GeneratePress gives you the ability to set a variable for this font. So by default, it's just going to be using the name of the font here. So we can see this font name's here. The other one's just going to say enter. But I actually changed this to headings for my heading font. We'll go ahead and save that. We'll go back to the enter and go down to advanced options. And I'm going to change this from enter to body. Now, when we do that, we get this font family variable down here. It's setting up a custom property for this. I will use this inside of my CSS here in a bit, and we're going to reference this in here. And if it was referencing the name of the font and we ended up changing the font name, it becomes a little bit messy. So by giving this kind of a utility, a utility name, body font, headline font, whatever fonts you're adding in there, we're able to use this a little bit better inside the typography system. So we'll go ahead and save those changes here. And let's see what's going to be the best way to do this. We'll jump back into the customizer here, and we will just go ahead and set up. Now you can see since we added those fonts to our font manager there, they are showing up here inside the customizer. You can go in here and set, here on the body, we'll go ahead and set our enter font for the body. And if we go in here and add all headings, we can go ahead and set our other font for the all headings. That'll go ahead and change it in here. And this will now default all of our headings and body copy to the right font, which is a pretty easy way to set it up inside here. Same thing if you were wanting to change the typography inside your menu. I'll often just go in here and do primary menu items. Let's say we wanted to change this to one rem. We can go in here and using one rem, and we're changing our primary menu inside here. But the rest of the typography, I'm going to do a little bit differently. So let's go ahead and I think we'll go ahead and do that right now, even though, like I said, we're not going to probably do this. I'm not going to do this inside my starter site. I do want to show you how I set all this up. So I set up a simple responsive font size calculator a while back. There's a video on my channel about how all of this works, so I won't go into too much detail here. But I use this calculator myself. In fact, the video's right there. I use this calculator for myself all the time. We can set our body font size here. We can change the scale if we want, the fonts to get much, much bigger or not have much size difference between them. I'm just going to leave that on default here. And I'm going to go down and copy all of this CSS. So we'll go ahead and copy this here. We'll jump back into our website. We'll get out of the customizer here and we'll go into the file editor. We're going to have to say we understand and into our style sheet. So I'm just going to go ahead and take everything that I copied from my clipboard and paste it in here. And now this is setting the font size to everything that came out of that calculator. It's using clamp function, so it's going to scale nice. But this is actually where I'm controlling the size of my font and not inside the customizer. If you're not used to writing a whole lot of code, this is a little bit more difficult to keep up with than the options you have in the customizer, but we can't use the clamp functions in we can use the clamp functions in there, but what I'm actually doing and what you can figure out in that video if you watch it is I'm setting this for my H1 font size, but I'm also setting it for a class using FSH1. That way, if I have a paragraph that I want to make look like one of my H1s, I can use this FS class and it will use the same font size we're using for our H1. So being able to target two elements here inside the CSS gives us kind of a superpower that we don't have if we do this inside of the customizer. All right, looks like we got a question from Adam here. Let's see. If this is not how you do it in your starter site, then how would you do it inside your starter? So I'm just going to leave all of this out of my starter site. There would be nothing as far as typography inside my starter site, and I would just build that out whenever I start a project. Like I said, I think before I built all this stuff in my last year's version, I built all this stuff into my starter site, and then I would go build, design something in Figma, go into my starter site, and then have to go undo and change all those things. So I was having to do all the work anyways. So instead of putting it in there, having to take it out and put the new stuff in, I'm just going to leave it blank and then put the new stuff in as I need it. However, there is one other thing that is super handy in here, and I'm going to copy and paste it from another screen so you don't have to sit here and watch me type in CSS. I'm going to paste this in here and we'll zoom in a little bit. So what I've set up here are just some utility classes. So FF for font family, then body. And this is using that font family. And then the variable we just set up in the font library here. So when I change that from enter to the word body, now I can target using the body font here if I just add the class FF body or add the class FF heading. And what's nice about this is I can now take this, let's say this heading one, I'm going to go ahead and copy that to my clipboard. And in here, I can go ahead and add this to each one of the declarations. This is kind of a manual process. Maybe I should add this to the calculator itself, but we'll go ahead and just add this to all 6 of these. This way, if I do have a paragraph, oh, you can't see what I'm doing because my head's in the way. Thank you. Let's see here. We'll completely get me out of the way and get your comment off the screen. There we go. So I added that font family declaration to each one of these. That way, if I do have a paragraph and I want to make it look like an H1, because the tag on it is still paragraph, it would be using my paragraph font. But because now I'm explicitly saying on anything using this FSH1 class to use my heading font, now it will not only change the size, but also change to the right font. So I'll zoom back out here. And like I said, we're going to talk about later how you can just get a copy of all this CSS and all the PHP and everything I add to this. But I wanted to kind of go through this and explain. Looks like David's got a trick. Awesome. I am glad to hear it. I could use it. All right. Thank you all for getting me on the comment. I appreciate that. And sorry, everything was in the way. Like I said, you'll have access to all this stuff when we get to the end of this. All right. To a drink and then back to my notes here. All right, so the next thing now that we got the typography and colors all set up is to set up a menu. Again, I don't know what the menu, I need to save these changes. I don't know what the menu for any given site is going to be. So we'll go in here and just create a pretty basic menu. I'm going to call it primary. I'm going to make it my primary menu. I'm also, going to assign it to my off canvas menu and we'll hit create. I'll go ahead and add one page in here. So let's see. Save menu, add to menu. We want to do a page. I thought we could just add a page in here. Why am I not seeing it? Zoom back in a touch. You got it. Is that a little bit better? Yeah, I forget. I'm on a, in fact, should have done this before. Now I can probably zoom out and things won't be so tiny. I'm on a much bigger monitor now, so that probably works better. All right, so we can't add pages from here. Unfortunately, I forget. I usually do this inside the customizer, menus, primary, add items. Here, you're able to add pages, and in the other one, you're not. But so here, I could go ahead and add a home page now, and now that home page is inside of my inside of the pages there, and it's also here inside my nav because I've set this to be my primary menu and the off canvas menu. So again, for a starter site, I'm really only going to, good thinking, David. He said here, I set a custom target element in the typography customizer section with this selector and then showed this selector here, H1 through H6 or class star, which is basically anything that contains this. Looks H, and I have mine FS or whatever font size. He's got a looks whatever. So perfect. Obviously, I'm using looks rather than FS. Exactly. Great suggestion here, David. I would try to change that all now on the fly, but I would screw something up. I like your suggestion. I'm definitely going to change mine to that, but not at this exact moment. All right, excellent. So now that we at least have a menu in place, whenever we're building a site, I'll know what the menu is. I can go add all those pages, no problem. But I do want to go ahead while I'm here and set my home page to display as that home page I just created. And now when we go to the home page URL, we'll go to the home page here. All right, the last thing I want to do inside my customizer here is under the additional CSS, I add this little comment to it. And this comment just says, additional CSS is for testing only. All finalized CSS should be added to a style sheet in the child theme. Now, the reason I put this here is mostly for me, but in case anybody else comes into the site, I don't like leaving any of my finalized CSS here inside the customizer because it's just too easy for clients to access. Like they can find this pretty easily, and I typically don't want them messing with CSS. So I'll use the customizer here. Let's just say I want to do H2 because I think I have some of those on the page. Background red and perfect. We can live preview any of the CSS we write inside the customizer. We don't really have that ability when we're writing CSS inside the child theme. So I'll often use the additional CSS here just to test things out where I can have the benefit of the live preview. But once this is finalized, I like to take it out of here and go put it into my child theme. Not that the clients couldn't get to the child theme, but they're less likely to find the child theme, press the button that they understand they're making crazy changes to the website, and then go in and start tweaking stuff. I just think it's less likely that they do that. So I like to put that note in here that this area for CSS is just for testing purposes, not for any of my finalized CSS. Oh yeah, talking this much is getting my my congestion back, so that's great. Got a cough drops on tap though, so that's excellent. All right, let's see here. The next thing we're going to start working on is the child theme CSS file. So I'm going to go back in here under appearance and then theme file editor. We can see we added these things to the style sheet. What I like to do for mine is put any of the site specific stuff here inside this style sheet, but I create a separate style sheet for all my theme overrides. So we're going to do all that here, but let's go ahead and change some stuff up here. Here's where when we downloaded that starter site or the blank child theme, it comes in with GeneratePress child as the name and this URL. You can change all this. So I'd probably change this to Ogle theme and change this to ogleweb.com and say, I don't know, Kyle's GP theme. Author, we'll get rid of Tom. We'll put Kyle. Maybe we'll put my personal website in here, kylevanduzen.com. Template, you want to leave alone. Do not change that because that's what's actually referencing the parent theme that you're using. So make sure you leave that alone if you do make changes up here. And then you can set your version number here. I'm not usually versioning things, so that's okay. Now, if we go ahead and update this and go into our themes, we can see that's changed the name of the theme here. If we go into the theme details, we can see it's by Kyle Van Duzen. It links to my website. It's got the little description here of Kyle's GP theme. All that is great. It is showing this, this default screenshot for like the cover image. We're going to fix that here in a minute. It's pretty easy to switch that out as well. Now, like I said, I will use this style.css for all the CSS I'm going to add to any specific site, but I have a bunch of CSS that I want to use on every site, kind of like my overrides for GeneratePress, things that I want to do a little bit differently. I found that when I did all of that inside of one style sheet, it was hard for me to tell what were the default overrides that I set up, and then what were the things that were specific to this site. So what I've decided to do in changing that up is create a secondary style sheet here where I can put all my overrides in it and then put all my site-specific stuff here in this styles.css. Now, you'd probably want to FTP into your install here, go through your server and all that. I didn't want to mess with all that on this live stream, so I'm just going to use WP File Manager. I think that's what it's called here. I typically don't like to use these kind of plugins just because it gives people access to way too much. But we'll use it here just for demo purposes, and then we'll delete it before we forget. But if we go in here into the file manager, we go into our WP content, themes, and then this child theme. These are all the files that we were just looking at here inside the theme file editor. All I want to do in here is do a new file. We'll call it a CSS file, and then we'll call this overrides. And I got to make sure I spell it right. I have too many R's. So overrides.css. And once that saves in there, you see it flash real quick. Now, if we go back into Appearance Theme File Editor, we have this additional CSS file in here. And this is where I'm going to put in all the overrides for the GP theme that I prefer, essentially. But while we're here, we'll go back into this file manager. It's going to dump us into that same directory. This is the screenshot it's using for the preview thumbnail of your theme. If you want to change that out, I would recommend just download that. I'll go ahead and put it in that same folder. We'll jump into Figma here. I'm going to go ahead and import that file. So here's that screenshot. This way you have the exact dimensions and everything you need. Here inside Figma, I'm just going to put that inside of a frame. We'll delete out this old one, and then we can just design whatever we want. I'm just going to do something simple here. We'll drop in the admin bars logo, maybe size it up a little bit. And then you just want to make sure that you call this screenshot. So it has to be named screenshot. I believe it has to be all lowercase like that. We'll go in here, we'll export it, and we'll make sure it's set as a PNG. So I'll go ahead and export that. I already have one inside of here, so I'm gonna have to override it. So good deal on that. But now if we go back into our install, I'll have to open up my Finder here. Documents, the admin bar, starter site demo. Now we can see this screenshot that I just saved is right here. If I just dump that in here, it's going to ask me if I want to override it. I'm just going to say yes. And now you can see we have a different little preview thumbnail there. And now if we go in here into our themes, we'll refresh it here. And now we can see we have the screenshot that we set up rather than the default GeneratePress one. All right, so that was a bit of a side tangent here. Let's get back to setting up all these overrides. So we're going to go in here into our overrides.css file. I have all of these off screen here, and I'm just going to kind of paste them in section by section, and we'll talk about them a little bit. So the first one here is the site header override. In fact, let me grab my comments too. So here is the site header override. Back when we were first setting up all the customizer stuff, we went into the header and zeroed out that padding on the left and right. This is just going to bring that padding back, but it's actually putting on that outer container and not the inner container, which is where I prefer it to be. Now I use a clamp function for that padding value. We're going to look at that later as we set up all of our global styles. But if you just wanted, 24 pixels or whatever, whoops, you could just change this to 24 pixels. Totally fine. Like I said, I use a clamp function there. So that will put that padding back to where it belongs. All right, the next set of CSS here, and I'll make sure that my head's not in the way of any of this. Setting up text wrap balance and text wrap pretty. So I will put the balance on all my H1s through H6s. What this does is just make sure that headlines don't have a really long line and then a really short line underneath it. The browser engine will just find those and try to balance the amount of words on each line. Now, the reason I only put that on the H1 through H6s is text wrap balance only works on, I believe, 3 lines of text, and anything over that, it no longer works. So it works nicely here inside the headlines, but it doesn't work nice for your body copy or anything like that. What I do for the body copy, my block quotes, and my list items is a different property. It's still using text wrap, but this time it uses pretty. All pretty does is get rid of any orphan. So if you have some kind of paragraph that only has one word at the end of the paragraph that's on its own line, it will bring the next word over so there's not any orphans inside your typography like that. Now, I have heard people talk about this being possibly a performance hit. I could see if you had some huge application with, thousands of paragraphs on it, that's probably a lot of work for the browser. Most of the time, I'm building brochure websites that might have, even a blog post, it might have 100 paragraphs or something on it. This is probably not going to have a real performance hit, but I thought I would mention it just in case. Some people are more picky about that than others. I haven't seen any real noticeable downside to doing it, and it makes your typography look a whole lot nicer. So I will keep it in there. The next is a declaration here for paragraphs that are the last child and last of type, just to change out that bottom margin to 0. The reason this comes in, and maybe it's harder to explain than it would be to show, but a lot of times we'll have something like a card that's encapsulated. You can see the edge of it because it's a different background color, or maybe it has a border around it. When you put paragraphs in there, all your paragraphs have a default bottom margin that keeps them from all your paragraphs butting up next to each other. But when it's the last child and the last paragraph in there, you really want to get rid of that bottom margin because it makes the space around your card look kind of funky. So this little declaration for a paragraph that's the last child and last of type, just zeroing out that margin is really, really helpful. So I put that inside my starter site as well. All right, next thing here, we have a few utilities. We'll go ahead and paste these in. I'll make sure I'm scrolled up so I'm not covering these too bad. And what we have here are some line limits. So this comes in handy if you have something like a blog card and You have the excerpt length, but that controls how many characters are in it. Often I want to control how many lines. Like I only want this to be 2 lines tall, and then it can have an ellipses after it. Line limit is something that allows you to do that. So I set up utility classes for line limit 3 and line limit 2, and all this CSS here takes care of it. That way, when I'm in the editor, if I just need to limit this to 2 or 3 lines, I can do that really quickly by just adding this utility class. Not something I use a ton of, but it's nice to have it kind of baked into the starter site. And then here we have visually hidden. I can tell that I'm in the way, so I'm going to bump this up here. Visually hidden is a nice. I think WordPress actually has something built in now, so this might not be totally necessary. But this is a way to hide something from the visual side of the website, so you won't see it on the site, but it still exists. So if you're needing something like a heading that explains what the section is, and it would be really important for a screen reader to hear that, or to keep all your heading orders in place, even though you might not need to see that. This is a way to visually hide that without taking it out of the DOM. Again, not something I'm using all the time, but it's nice to have a utility class here in place. Anytime I need that, I can just pop in that visually hidden class, and it takes care of that right away. Another new one that I added here recently is this transition. I found that inside GenerateBlocks, a lot of times when I'm doing a hover style or something like that, I also need to add a transition. None of those hover states come with any kind of transition on them. And when you add those in GenerateBlocks, it's not hard, but it's 3 or 4 clicks. You got to add a transition. You got to change the timing. You got to change the timing function. And you just have to do it over and over and over. So I've just created a little utility class here called transition. It is going to transition all the properties, which kind of like this text wrap pretty. In theory, I think that could probably have some kind of performance issues, but in practical terms, I don't think it will. Here is just setting kind of a reasonable default. It's going to transition all properties 0.25 seconds and ease in out for the timing function. This way, instead of all those extra clicks, I can just add that transition class. And when I'm hovering over a button or something, it will have a decent transition on it. So that's just another one just to save me a little bit of time. And then the last one that I have inside this starter site is my accessibility tweak for the menu, which we talked about earlier. So let's demo it first, because I think it'll make more sense if I show you. So I'm going to just go in here to my menu, and I'm just going to put some kind of link in here, sub item. Go ahead and add that to my menu, and I'll make sure that that's nested under this just so we have a drop down. Now, if we go in here to view the site, we can see when we hover over this, nothing happens, which I think for somebody using a mouse, they would want to hover over this and see the drop down. But because we set that in the customizer to click the arrow in order to see the drop down, you have to actually click the arrow to do that. Now, the reason I set that is because if we were using a screen reader and we were just tabbing through this site, we wouldn't want to have to tab through all the drop down. Because we have this set to click the arrow, somebody has to press enter on their keyboard to get to that sub item, and then they can go down. But if they just want to skip over it, they can hit tab again and get out of that menu without having to go through all of your sub menu items. But like I said, I don't love that as far as the user experience when you're actually using a mouse. I don't think that's the preferred behavior here. And I got this CSS from Taylor Drayson. Again, he's going to make another appearance here. I've stolen a lot of things from him. Go ahead and paste this in. This is just a little bit of CSS here that will allow us to still set that for screen readers or somebody keyboard navigating, where they have to actually press enter on the arrow in order to get to that drop down. But for anybody who's using a mouse here, if we go visit the site now, oh, you know what? It's not going to work because I haven't enqueued all this CSS yet. So we will have to come back to this. I didn't think about my order of operations. Actually, let's just demo it. I'll go in here and just grab that CSS. Sorry about that. This could have been done a little bit easier. I'm just going to pop it into the additional CSS here so we can actually see how it works. So now when you hover over it, you're going to see that drop-down menu. But we still have the benefit of when we're tabbing through, we have to click on that arrow in order to get to that. So it's kind of best of both worlds. Yes, doing it live. Yeah, I believe the arrow announces properly. So let's see. We have okay, so we have a span with the roll of button, and then we have an ARIA label of open sub menu. So all of this, I believe, is accessible and announcing properly. But with that little bit of CSS that I just added, now we still get the benefit of using our mouse, hovering over this and getting what you would expect. But we're not disrupting screen reader users or people who are tabbing from having to tab through all of our sub items. I'm just going to delete that out of our customizer here, and we have it here nicely inside of our overrides file. All right, perfect. So those are all the overrides I'm going to do inside this child theme. I actually thought of one more, which is a trick to make an entire card clickable, and I didn't put this inside the starter site, and I really should. And I don't know that I have that handy, although Jonathan, YouTube, Jonathan Jernigan. Jonathan did a video on this somewhere. One class solution. So this is it. We'll copy this and I'll put it into the chat. Perfect. So that way, if you want to see, this is like a stretch link. This is going to allow you to actually link like a button or a headline inside your card, but make the whole card clickable. That's something that I definitely want inside my child theme, but failed to think of that before we did the live stream. All right, let's see. Shonda, you got a question here. If the client doesn't want the main menu item a link, is that accessible? It went away on me. There we go. Nope. I want an argument on why we shouldn't do that. So I think this is a tangent, but let's do it. So let me just add some here. Non-clickable. In order to add it to the menu, we have to put a URL in there. I'm just putting a jump link, and I'll put sub item again. Add to menu. We'll nest that under there. Once you've added that, so let's go take a look at the front end. So right now, even though this non-clickable doesn't go anywhere, it's still set up as a link. But I think if once you add it, if you go back in here and get rid of that link that's in there, it was just a pound sign in this case. Let's actually make the sub item a link. So we'll just say the adminbar.com. So now this non-clickable doesn't have a URL in it. Let's refresh it. No, it still puts a link around it. So yeah, I'm not sure on that. That is a pain in the butt. We'd probably have to have some kind of code that fixed that. Yeah, because it is putting that non-clickable link inside there. Look, Taylor's got a snippet to fix it. There you go. So we just need to talk to Taylor. He doesn't know where it is. So he's got time to find that, and then maybe he can share it with us, because that would be awesome, because that is a bit of a problem. All right, I'm going to delete these things out of here just so they're not in this copy. Go ahead and say that again. All right, back into, no, you're good, Dennis. I appreciate you mentioning this. All right, so we did all of our CSS. The style sheet we're going to use for site-specific stuff. The overrides we're going to use for any overrides in our theme. And the next is our PHP functions.php file. So I am not a wizard at PHP, so I'm going to fumble my way through this a little bit. Like I said, I'm going to share all this. I think it's all pretty safe, but famous last words, use at your own risk. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to paste in all this PHP here. What this is going to do is enqueue the style sheet into the editor and into the front end. So earlier when I put that override for the menu into the overrides file, it wasn't actually working on the front end. That's because we haven't enqueued that style sheet and told our website to actually use that style sheet. So what all this PHP is going to do is enqueue that override style, that overrides.css file we created. And then it's also going to make sure to enqueue that overrides and our default style CSS into the editor. If you don't enqueue these things into the editor, you'll notice that if you put any kind of styles into your style sheet and then you go open on the back end, you're not seeing any of those styles come through. So this actually enqueues all those into the editor so you can see all that custom CSS as you're working on things. There are a few quirks about it because the the WordPress editor, the way it will inject some things into the editor. Sometimes things aren't perfect one for one, but like 90% of things will work, which makes it a whole lot better. And then this last one here actually enqueues all the CSS you put into the additional CSS in the customizer. In case you do put CSS there, it does enqueue that into the editor as well. So you get the benefit of seeing all that on the back end. All right, let's see here. So in a minute, we're going to set up our a layout element that's going to make everything on our website full width, edge to edge. That's because I want to set up containers and wrappers and everything using GenerateBlocks. The problem with that, excuse me, the problem with that is it will make all of our posts full width in the back end. So when you go in there and write a blog post, you have to write all the way across your screen, which is really annoying. So I have this little bit of PHP here that will just limit the width inside the editor. This is just kind of a quirk of the way I set things up inside of GenerateBlocks. So you may or may not need that. All right, next we have removing comments. So I'm almost never using comments. 99% of time, I'm not using comments. So I just add this PHP to get rid of the comment functionality inside of WordPress. You can see our comments are showing right now, but if we save this, refresh it, comments are gone. That way, if I do need to add comments back, I can just go delete this and we can add comments. But most of the time, I'm not going to be using comments. So I just go ahead and get rid of that. All right, let's see here. The next thing we got is all the default WordPress core block patterns. So I'm sure you've seen all these before. Core has tons of block patterns. They never match your website. So I hate for clients to go in there and actually see all those block patterns that don't make sense on their website. So this little bit of PHP will just remove that so they can't ever see any of those core block patterns and get confused and use the wrong thing. I'm going to set up patterns inside GenerateBlocks so they can use those ones. All right, here we got a couple more snippets. This one removes all the date archive pages. I almost never need people to go to an archive of a specific date. It's built into WordPress, but I don't need it, so I get rid of that. And then the other is post formats. I don't think we've been using post formats for a while. I'm not even sure if it shows up in the newest versions of the editor. That's been in my child site, my child theme for a long time, so I just leave it there. All right. Next up, we have disabling all of our dashboard widgets. I'm gonna go ahead and paste this in here. So if we, let's just open up the dashboard here, not in a private window. We have all of these widgets in here. I think they're ugly and they're not really helpful. So this little bit of PHP will hide all of those dashboard widgets. So now that we save that and refresh it, well, it didn't get rid of all of them. It looks like a couple plugins are adding some, but if we dismiss this here, we have a lot less widgets. So we might have to go back and get rid of some more of these, but that at least helps. I'll go back and look and see if I can fix that to just get rid of all widgets before I share all this code, because I'd rather just have nothing on that dashboard than have some of that junk. All right, next we got hiding the admin menu for non-admin. So this is going to hide things like activating plugins. If you're not an admin, I don't want you activating plugins. So that's just a little tweak I make in there. And then this one, again, is kind of a quirk to how I set up GeneratePress and GenerateBlocks. I'm going in here and removing the archive title. By default, it's going to inject that title into all of the archives. I don't want it in there. It also injects a title into the search results. I like to control that myself, so I'm actually using a short code that if I need to put in a search result title, I can bring that in. I'll show you my old starter site. I don't think we'll be able to build all that out today, but I'll circle back and show you why this is helpful, the way I set up search result pages. All right, we're getting closer to the end of this. Last login time. So if you've ever dealt with the clients who said, no, I didn't do that, I didn't even log into the site today, this will help you find that. So this just records the last time somebody logged into the website. So I can go in and see when they were last logged into the website. Just a little bit of PHP there. I like having that in there just so I can see when the last time is a client logged in and messed with their website. And then the last thing inside of all of this is my tweaks to my login page. This is a fairly long one, but it's mostly styling. So what this is going to do is kind of override the login page. In fact, let's go take a look at it. We will do it in a private window this time. So this will be the login page you're all used to, which is nice and ugly. Go ahead and get rid of that. The only thing you really have to do with this, if you use this, this snippet, is here I've set up some variables for colors. So one is for your brand color, one is for your brand cover on hover. Looks like I got too many O's in that. And then one for login background color. So I'm just using these variables throughout all this CSS. You also would probably want to change the logo right now. This is showing a admin bar logo. And then the link of where you want people to go if they click on that logo. But if I go ahead and update this now, and again, we'll go to that login page in a private window. Now this is what the login page looks like. So I was using some pink colors, and those colors there, we could obviously dress that up. This is kind of just a slight tweak on the default login page, but it looks a little bit more modern and nice. And now anytime I see the old login page, it bugs me. So I like to have that baked into my starter site as well. All right, bear with me here for a second. I'm going to regather my notes, get a drink of water, because we're done with all that PHP, and that is probably the least fun part of all of this, especially since I didn't write it all. I kind of got help on it, or help from probably Taylor or ChatGPT on most of it. All right, we are coming into the home stretch now. So I want to configure some of these plugins. I'll at least tell you how I would configure some of them. We won't bother doing it. One is the Postmark plugin, like I talked about. If you click this link, it will take you to your Postmark account. You can paste in the API key, and then you can set your email here. Once you save those changes, like I said, anytime you duplicate this starter site, it holds all those settings. So your brand new install that you create off of your starter site already has transactional email working. Even if it's not at the final address you want it to be, while you're developing, at least you're going to get any of those emails you need to get. So it's already in there. In block visibility, there is one change you almost have to make, which is here under visibility controls. And I think it's down here. So if we scroll down to the screen size, they have some settings inside of block visibility where you can control things by breakpoint. I don't always use those, but if I do use those, it's really important that those breakpoints line up with your breakpoints in the theme. By default, block visibility uses 992 for the large, and GeneratePress uses 1024. So we'll go ahead and change that to 1024 pixels. GeneratePress uses 768, so we're good on that. But if you change those, that way everything will sync up nicely. And yeah, I see we're not seeing your link here, Taylor. I think YouTube will strip out all of the links inside the chat. It just assumes they're all spam. So if you will, if you'll like DM that to me on Facebook or something, and I'll make sure to put it inside the description of this video and include it with all the stuff at the end, because I think YouTube's just going to strip that out of there. So if you get that over to me, I'll make sure to put it inside the perfect. Send it on Facebook. Perfect. I'll add that inside the description of this video. Check back later today, and I'll make sure to have that in there. All right, here is a really, really cool one for all my Perf Matters users. So whenever you install Perf Matters, basically everything is turned off, and you have to go through and configure all this. You can't even see all the settings because so many things are turned off. It's kind of a pain in the butt. So I reached out to Brian at Perf Matters and said, hey, I'm building a GeneratePress, GenerateBlocks starter site, and I want just all the sensible defaults you would use for a site using that stack. Now, you're probably still going to have to make some tweaks, but Brian was nice enough to create an export of all the settings he would recommend for me. So we're just going to go here under Tools, under Choose File, and then I have Perf Matters Settings Export. I'm going to go ahead and open that. We'll save changes. And now if we go, hopefully, if we go refresh this, didn't work. Why didn't it work? Tools, import settings, Perf Matters. There we go. I didn't press import. Now we'll save changes. Now if we go through all this, these are all the settings that Brian would recommend for a GeneratePress, GenerateBlocks site, which is awesome because this is going to get like 99% of the work done for you. So I'll make sure to share that with all the resources as well. Yes, Brian is amazing. All right, WS Form. So I don't know how many of you use WS Form. If you don't, you should. It's amazing. But if we go in here into styles, I obviously haven't used this yet, so it's giving me a little welcome thing. If we go in here to our styles, we have two styles that come with the plugin by default: light, or the standard light, and then a conversational light. I almost never use conversational forms, but since this is a light site, we'll go ahead and edit this one. What I wanted to show you is that this new styler from WS Form is pretty freaking amazing. But one thing you can do that's really handy is you can map all the colors in your form to your GeneratePress colors. Now, because I'm using all those variables, I can use all my color variables in here. So I'm going to be copying and pasting here. But if we go in here to base and I paste in, this is the variable I'm using inside the customizer. You know, all the colors we imported from Taylor. These are those variables I'm using, and it will pick up all these colors inside here. In fact, you can see it's outputting this hex code down here. But what's nice about this is if you go set this up inside your starter site, I'm just going to set up some of these. The base, we'll do the base contrast, accent, go ahead and paste that in, neutral, paste that in, primary, we'll paste that in, secondary, we'll paste that in. You can see all those colors from my palette are coming in. And then here under, I think it's field, and then border style, border color. Here we can go ahead and paste in more of those variables. Won't do all of them, but these few that I'm showing you right now are the ones that are going to do the vast majority of everything. Paste that in, paste this focus color in. And once you get that, now you're using all the colors from your theme. So now your form matches the rest of your website. But what's great about that is because it's just referencing these variables. If we go in and change those variables to new hex values later, you know, we get a new client site and they obviously have different brand colors. When we update this brand primary color, since WS Form is just referencing this variable, it will update this color. So that means like 90% of your form styling is done by default by just doing those things I showed you right there, which are just some of these things in this default color palette, and then some of the things in the border color. Now, you can change all kinds of things in here, and you could go through and set all these up. I typically don't. I will use what I just showed you right now, and then that will do, like I said, 90% of it. And if I need to do some tweaks later on, it's not really a big deal. All right, so we'll go ahead and save those changes here, and we can go out of here. And next, I want to set up some ACF stuff. So two things I like to do basically in every install. So I'm going to bake those into my starter site. One is a post type. Oh, I got to add my license here. Let me take this off screen. Put my license key in. It doesn't obfuscate it. So post types. Okay, it should be good now. Go back. And there we go. Okay, so the first post type I'm going to add is one called policies. So policies. Why can't I spell that? I did. Okay, so policy. I will use this for terms of service, privacy policy, all that kind of stuff. I don't like having that junking up all my pages. And if I just put this inside of a custom post type, I can create one template for it that all of them will follow, and they're all kind of sectioned off in their own place inside the install. Now you can see we have policies up here. That way, this is something that doesn't get in my way of all my posts and pages and all that. It has kind of its own drawer for all those things. The other thing I set up now that GeneratePress allows us, or GenerateBlocks allows us to query things in from options pages, is just kind of a default options page. So I'll call this company details, let's say, and we'll go ahead and hit save changes. Then we can go into our field groups, create a new one, and we'll say company details. And we're going to map this to our options page. So we can go in here somewhere is options page. You probably couldn't see it because my fat head is in the way. There we go. So down here, show a field group is options page is equal to company details, which is the one we just set up. And then inside here, I set up a few different fields. So one is company name, And I will usually change this field name because this is what we're going to reference on the back end. I will usually change this to options _ company name. That way, in case I'm using company name in some other way, I'm not overriding something. So company name, company primary email. Again, I'm going to change this to options _ we can actually change this to an email field. Add a field. This is going to be text, company primary phone. Again, options _ and then one more, which is company primary address. Again, options _ So the benefit of doing this is now we have this company details area here where you can fill in the company name, the email, the phone number, the primary address. You can query that in anywhere you're putting that information into the website. And when your client emails you and says, hey, we changed our email address, you don't have to go through the entire site finding each one of them and change them. You can go update them here inside your options page, and it's going to update it everywhere across the website because you've kind of abstracted the thing. So I do have a video on options pages somewhere on my YouTube channel, so I'll make sure to link that as well in case you haven't used options pages before, but it is super, super handy. All right, look, David stole the policy CPT. I love CPTs, and the policies are something that just get in the way, so no use having those in there. So the company details, like I said, the options pages, I'll just show you real quick. If we go in here and add a new page, and we'll add a text block, we can go into our dynamic data, scroll down here, option, and now, of course, it's not showing our meta keys. I thought it would show our meta keys. Option, company, name, add. But I didn't add anything to it. That's probably why it's not showing. So company details, we'll call this the company co. Update that, pages, all pages. Now if we go in here, dynamic data, options, company name. Now we go ahead and insert that, and now it's going to show that company name in there. So handy to have all this in there, especially for those times when a client comes back. They're probably not going to change their company name, but it's nice to, you're not going to make a typo. You know, if you put it all in one place and you have to type out the company name 50 times, if you're just always referencing that one place, it's always going to be spelled correctly. Looks like we have a couple drafts here that I'm going to get rid of too while we're at it. Delete those. Excellent. All right. And then Short Pixel has some settings as well. We'll go in here. We're not going to be able to get to them without my API. I'll try it this way. Okay. So here under image optimization, I usually leave this on lossy. And if we go in here to WebP, AVIF, CDN, I'll go ahead and turn on the create WebP images and the serve the WebP images using the picture syntax, and go ahead and hit save there. I think it's only the via. Yeah, I think it's this first one, only via the WordPress hooks. Go ahead and save that. Those are the only changes I make in Short Pixel, but that way it will go ahead and create WebPs if I don't create a WebP, and it will serve that appropriately. I think everything supports WebPs now, so not a huge deal, but definitely helpful to have that in there in case you upload some giant files that aren't really necessary. All right, just a couple more things left here. So Elements is next. So GP Elements is one of the most powerful features inside GeneratePress. Could not live without it. I'm going to show you what elements I set up. I'm not going to build them all out because it would take us an extra hour in here, but I'll show you what I set up. So the first one is my layout element. So I'll just call this default layout. I'm going to set this to be content, no sidebars. I'm going to do all the layout stuff with GenerateBlocks, not GeneratePress. So this is kind of just getting rid of everything. No footer widgets. I'm going to disable the content title here. We'll go into content. We'll change this to full width, no padding. It's going to allow us to use GenerateBlocks across the entire width of the page. And then I set that to the entire site. We'll go ahead and hit publish. And now if we view this site on the front end again, getting lots of tabs open here. Everything will allow us to go full width on this site, which is exactly what we want. All right, and then as far as other elements, we're going to choose a block element. We're going to have a single post layout. So I'll do single post, and in parentheses, I'll do blog. Here, we're going to set this content type to content template, or element type to content template. We'll change the editor width to 100%. And we'll go in here under posts, and we'll set this to all posts. Now, of course, you're going to want to have something in here. If you don't want to design anything into your starter site, that's totally fine. I thought I would show you in my old starter site, single post. I had a very generic layout where we were bringing in the post title, the excerpt, the author, the image. But like I said, I found so many times that I was going, okay, well, I'm not actually using this, and I have to delete it all and build it again. So 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I like to at least have the elements in here. Did I close the wrong thing? Okay. There we go. I like to at least have the elements in here so they're already created and I don't forget to create them. So go ahead and publish this. This is where we're going to put our blog post template. Get my notes back. We also need to create one for our policies. So we're going to do the same thing, a block. This is going to be single post. And here we're going to do policies. Since we created that policy CPT, again, editor width 100%, content template. We got to do it in the right order. And down here under the locations, I'm going to change this to policy, all policies. Of course, you're going to want to design some kind of simple template here. I mean, we would probably just do something like a container with an inner container, and then we'd use our dynamic content and just bring in the post content where we can just paste in our policies into the back end. I'll go ahead and delete that. We'll leave it blank now just so we have at least a element here in place. Next, a footer. Got to have a footer on every website, and I like using GenerateBlocks for that. So we're going to change this to footer. Our element type here, we're going to change to site footer, and then we'll go in here and we'll do this on the entire site. So this is going to be our footer for the entire site. In my old version, let's see here, pull this back up. What I built into my footer was actually three different footers. So there's one here, one there, and then one there. And then I could kind of pick from which one. It saved me from having to rebuild all these every time. So like I said, if you wanted to add something like that, at least you would have some kind of footer already in there. I keep grabbing the wrong thing. But we have this set to site footer. We have it set to the entire site. That's good enough for our purposes here today. Go ahead and save that. Again, back out of here, we need to set up a 404 template. So block, I'm going to call this my 404. Here for element type, we'll do content template 100%. And under here, we'll search for 404. That's going to be our 404 template. You can download or design something fairly basic for that. We need our archive loop template. So again, this is going to be for our blog archive page, any of our custom post type archives, all those kinds of things. So again, we're going to do a block here. We're going to change this content type to a loop template. So this is, in fact, we need to do archive loop. So in here, you're going to put in a query block, and you're going to want to make sure, so query, we'll start blank. We'll make sure we're on that query, and we want to set this to inherit query from template. This is using a template, and it's going to be applied to a lot of different archives. How many ever archives you have. So you want it to inherit that query, not hard code some kind of query in there. And then we just want to set this to archives, all archives. We can go ahead and publish that one. Let's see here. We got 2 more. Here is a block. This is going to be our search results. So we'll call this search results. Again, this is just a content template. Change that to 100%. We'll go in here and change this to search. So you got to do search results, and you also have to do no search results. I'm going to go ahead and publish those changes again. If we wanted to see what I did before, I don't want to get these mixed up. So on my search result, in fact, we wanted to talk about those shortcodes. So I actually use a shortcode in here that's bringing in that search title. inside of this area down here, I actually have a query loop that's inheriting that template. So it's going to bring in all the search results and query them there. I also keep a little search bar on here. I'm trying to think of any sites, Albits question s equals invest. So this is what that ends up looking like when somebody searches. So that's that query loop that you saw right here. Here is the title. We're seeing search results for, and then whatever they search for, and then the search bar at the top. So I did build this into my starter site before, so I just had at least a decent looking search page to start out with. This site and a lot of my sites, I don't put any kind of search button on, so most people are never going to find the search page. However, all that works with just the query here in WordPress. So I don't know about y'all, but I am constantly using just the little query parameter in here to try to find stuff on websites. So I want to make sure if somebody does end up figuring out how to search on the website, that at least something is there and it's not a total mess. All right, and then one more element here, which is what I call an announcement bar. So we're going to go in here. We'll call this announcement bar. Again, we're going to do this time we're going to do a hook, and we're going to choose this hook name as before header. I'm going to leave the location blank, but what I use this for is some kind of announcement bar across the website. So I'll show you. I think the admin bar's got one right now. So here's my announcement bar. So that's kind of what it would look like. You can design it however you want it to be. I will put that into my starter site here. I'll design something really simple, you know, a container with maybe a background color, center align the text, put some text inside of it. This is an announcement. I won't spend time right now making it look pretty. Make it look decent. The reason I love having this in my starter site is when your client emails you or calls you and says, we got to put a banner on the website. XYZ happened. Our power's out and we're closed, or we're going to be closed for this holiday or whatever. Those things are always a rush. And if you have to go build this little system out, it's an extra 5 or 10 minutes. And if you build this into your starter site, you have it there. So they call you and say that, and you say, not a problem, log in, boom, change that to whatever text it needs to be, assign it to wherever you want it to show, like the entire site or whatever it may be. And at least you have that announcement bar there, which is just handy to have. I'll go ahead and delete this out of there. Go ahead and publish it. I do it before the header, just so it shows up before the header, essentially. All right, last couple things here. One is, I think it's all going to be global styles. So I realize this is going super long. Holding on to lots of people, though. 45 of you still here. So obviously, no global styles already in here. You could go pretty crazy creating global styles for your starter site. I've narrowed it down to a few things. So we'll just use our homepage as an example here. The first thing is padding settings for my sections. So most of the time when you're building something on a website, you're going to have a section, you're going to have a wrapper inside of it, you're going to need some kind of padding. I usually have 4 or 5 different padding values that I like to use. So I like to set those up as global styles in here so I can quickly add them to the page. So what I'm going to do here is just add a container to my page. We're going to do section-XS for extra small. We'll hit create. Start with the blank style. We're going to go in here into the spacing, and we're going to add the padding values. So I'm going to copy and paste these from the other side here. But what I do for my extra small, that should be rim, 1 rim, top and bottom, which is very small. And I'm pasting in a clamp value here. That clamp value is the same one I put inside the header, inside the child theme. It's my left and right padding that's global across the entire website. So as I'm pasting these into all these different section classes we're creating, this left and right value is the same every single time. So because I know it's going to be the same every time, I can go in here and set up my next one. Like I said, the value of this is you only have to do this on your starter site, and then you never have to do it again, even though I've done it twice today. So next we'll do section S. I'm just going to clone this and clone my extra small one here. That will go ahead and bring those values in that I had. And since the left and the right is going to stay the same for all of these, all I have to do is paste in my clamp value for this bigger one, which is S. Now we can go in here again, container. This is going to be section M, create, clone. Doesn't matter which one we clone here. I'm going to grab the padding values and we'll paste it in here, paste it in there. So what I actually, I'm going to go ahead and save that. What I actually set up, I don't know the easiest way to show you. I kind of feel like going through these one by one isn't that helpful for you. What I set up is section XS, section S, section M, section D, section large, section XL. D is my default. What I use for that is like what's going to be the most common padding value across all my sections. And that's the one I'm using 9 times out of 10. But if I need a smaller section or a bigger section, I have these already built in. I can reuse these, 6 different classes all the way across the website. And it just makes it nice and quick whenever you are starting to build a new page and you say, okay, I need a container. This is going to be a section. I can just go in here and put section M, boom, all the padding's done, and it's going to be consistent across the entire website. The same thing goes for wrapper classes. So you're probably used to clicking this add inner container. This will add the inner container inside of it. What that does is set a max width value and then set a margin left and right of auto. Most of the time, I'm going to be using that default value, which is perfect using this global one that's coming from the customizer. But sometimes I need something a little bit wider. Sometimes I need something a little bit more narrow. So I like to set those up as global styles as well. So I'm going to go ahead and go in here to the container, and I'm going to set up wrapper-XL. This is going to be one that's wider than my default. So we'll go ahead and hit start on that. I have some values here that I've already copied and pasted. So we're going to go into our sizing. We'll make sure the width is set to 100%, but set the max width. In this case, it's 1496 pixels. And then we got to make sure to go into our margin and do auto for the left and right. And this is just creating a wrapper for us that's extra large, right? So we can go ahead and create a set of these as well. I have wrapper. We'll just do another. We'll do one more. I think y'all get the idea. Wrapper M. I'm going to go ahead and clone the wrapper we already made. That'll save me a couple clicks. And we'll go into the sizing here. And for M, I use 1064, which is here. So now you can see this is the width of my M wrapper or medium wrapper. The way I got all those values, if we went back into Figma here, this is kind of mapping all those out. If you want to grab a screenshot of it. These guides you can see here are equaling out to my 1280 pixels, which is the default I set up for my container width inside the customizer. I have a 12 column grid inside of it, which is typically what I'm developing on. There's 16 pixels in between each one of these grid lines here. So this is just kind of how the math runs out. This is the extra large one, which goes wider than my default width. The one that's my default width. Then the medium is basically 2 columns shorter. This left column, this right column. The small is 2 columns on either side. The extra small is 3 columns, and the extra small is 4 columns. So we have a nice varying set of widths here, all that still fit within my my grid system that I'm typically building on top of. And yes, Dennis says usually uses Bootstrap. Totally cool if you use that. This is kind of what I've developed over time in my own design style. So that's how I set it up. But having all those container padding values and then having all the wrapper widths is super, super handy when you're just flying through trying to build out sections. You don't have to go and set all those values every time. You just have utility classes for all of that. All right, so we'll save those changes there. And then we'll go into... let's see, we've got to do just a little bit of cleanup. So I know we cleaned up the default pages that came. I want to clean up these default posts. We have our hello world. Go ahead and delete that. Inside of categories, WordPress comes with uncategorized. And I don't know about you, but it drives me crazy when I see a blog post that says uncategorized. So I put general in there, and I'll change the slug as well. Go ahead and hit update. That way, if somebody forgets to add a category to a post, the worst case scenario is it's going to be category general, which feels a lot better to me than uncategorized. At least general feels on purpose, and uncategorized feels like it was an accident. All right, inside of settings, we'll go into general. You'll want to change that administration email address. InstaWP puts one of their email addresses in there, which feels like a weird security thing because they could just get into all my sites, but I guess they could get into my sites anyway, so it doesn't matter. Time zone, you definitely want to set that. I set mine to New York. That way all the times line up with your own time. Date format's good, week format's good, or time format's good. I set my week to start on Sunday because that's how my calendar works. And that's it. That is the entire starter site. And I got to take a breath here for 1/2 of a second, which would be awesome. And then I would love to answer any questions that anybody has. And then we'll talk about how you can get access to all this stuff as well. Sweet. Looks like it's working. Awesome. I got to take a drink. All right. How do I use the 12 column grid in GenerateBlocks? So I kind of do and I kind of don't. Most of the time I'm using that grid to design so I can like space things out nicely and give it, some make sure things are proportioned well. But oftentimes once I get into the builder, I don't actually need to put that into 12 grid columns in order to do that. However, you can do that. So if we went to the admin bar's YouTube channel and go into videos, I'm hoping you can still see my screen right now. You can't see my screen right now. I'm not paying attention. Let me add this back. If we go into videos and where are they? I did them not that long ago. Okay, so here I have one video called The Grid. This will teach you about how I set up that grid and why I use a 12 column grid. And then I have this one called GenerateBlocks CSS grid. So this talks about how you can create a 12 column grid in GenerateBlocks. And I give some examples of setting up that 12 column grid and then spanning things, multiple grid columns and stuff. I don't typically do that when I'm building out, usually it's 50-50 or, 25-75 or something. So I'm not a huge stickler to using this like you would maybe in something like Bootstrap or Tailwind or something where you're going to say this is going to take up 4 columns or whatever. I'm usually kind of building stuff on the fly. But for the most part, I use that more for design than I do for development. But those 2 videos there, one's 21 minutes, the other's 12 minutes, those will take you through that entire process. So if you want to see how to do that, I explain all that stuff in there. All right, any other questions? Dennis says, learned a lot. That's great. I'm going to go back through the chat here and make sure I just didn't miss any questions. Yeah, you're right, Adam. Changing that content template editor width is so annoying. You have to flip back over to the percent and change it to 100. I should just ask Tom about that. I'm not sure why that couldn't be fixed, but yes, that drives me crazy too. That's a good one. This goes back to when we were talking about the options page. David said he started adding fields for mission statement, a short description or bio, and others. That's awesome. David stealing the policy CPT. Great idea. I really like that. Okay. Ed asked here, when you're using the customizer CSS, do you clear it out as you finish components/pages or wait until the end of the project? What I would say to do and what I actually do are probably 2 different things here. Most of the time as I'm building, I will just put all that stuff inside the customizer because it's the quickest, easiest, and I have the live preview. And then once I'm ready to finalize the site, hand it over to the client, launch it, whatever it may be, then I can go back and put all that into the child theme. Probably be better to kind of keep that maintenance up as you go. Even if it's once a week, I got to dump all this stuff out of the additional CSS and put it into the child theme. The reason I say that is oftentimes when I get to the end of the project and it's time to launch, I'm not really in the mood to organize CSS. And everything I put into the additional CSS was like me experimenting. So there might be declarations that aren't needed or things aren't in the right order or they don't have comments. And you really need to do all that as you put it into your child theme. So it would probably be best to break that up into some individual chunks and not try to do it all at once. But most of the time I probably just do it all at once. All right. Let's see. Velocity Merchant Services. How did you learn how to build websites? Trial and error. let's see, courses from Dave Foy were really helpful. All kinds of YouTube videos, and just spending a bunch of time messing things up. So still learning how to build websites right now. You just got to stick at it and play with it a bunch. But I started actually on Wix. In fact, actually before that in high school, I took an HTML class. We built everything with tables. It was amazing. I don't think we had CSS at the time because I'm a dinosaur like that. But yeah, everything in tables, that was a lot of fun. Then I didn't touch it for 15 years. And then as I came back, I ended up going to Wix to do some things for somebody that needed some help, and found my way to WordPress and started going in that way. Started with Beaver Builder, then Elementor, Oxygen for a small period of time, and then into GenerateBlocks. All right. Let's see. Might have missed it out of curiosity. Do you still inject an outer wrapper element to the page? Ah, good question. Let's see here. I'm going to share my screen again, maybe, because everybody might not know what you're talking about here. All right. Share screen. That should do it. Okay. I'm going to hide your comment there. So one thing, David's referencing this. I've talked about this in past videos. I put an outer wrapper around a lot of pages like this, so that content doesn't span the full width of a screen. If somebody's on a really, really large monitor, like one of the wide screens, or if they're super zoomed out like I am right now, I do this a lot. I would call it like a contained site. I'll usually set that to 1920 pixels, which is kind of what I'm designing for anyways. There's no standard viewport size. Obviously, everybody's on something different, but 1920 usually works pretty well for me. I was trying to think of how we might see what this looks like when you don't have it. Let's see. We got to go to site wrapper. I have this set to max width at 1920. Let's put this at 999. Okay, that should make it a lot wider. So now if we zoom out here, we can see things like this logo was right over here by this, but now because it's just set to go to the edge of the page without a container, it's going way over to the edge of the page. Things like this, again, are getting pushed way over. If you set a background image, so if this didn't have just a gray color but had an image behind it, now the image would be filling up the whole width and it just looks insane. So caught the mute button right in time. Sorry about that. So yes, I will often put a wrapper around the entire site. That's something that I had built in and didn't put it into this one, but good reminder. I usually start with that because I just don't like, I like being able to control how wide the site will ever get. I know that it's never going to get wider than 1920 and I can design around that. All right, let's see here. Just for my understanding, standard is set to permalinks and always to post name right. Yes, that's a good question. I didn't even check to see if that was the default now. Oh, I'm on the wrong site. We don't want to start messing with my live site. Settings, permalinks. Yes, post name. So that must either that's default in WordPress now. I don't know, or it's default when you launch one from InstaWP. I'm not sure. But yes, I would always set that to post name. Sometimes if I'm needing to do something with like the way their posts need to be structured, sometimes I'll go with the custom structure and do like a category or something inside the URL, but it's very, very rare. So as far as starter sites go, I would probably keep this on post name. Great question though, and something I didn't check. The other thing, we didn't get rid of WP File Manager, and even though the site is never going live, I do not want that on my website. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. Like I said, you probably want to FTP into the site rather than just using the file manager. Okay, that's all the questions. I am zapped. I cannot talk any longer. So let's talk about how we can actually get a hold of this. So I was going to try to package everything up before this call. But one, I found a few boo-boos that I wanted to fix right before the call, so I wouldn't have everything done anyways. The other was I wanted to talk to y'all. I wanted to go through this with everybody, and we had some great suggestions from the comments here. I want to incorporate some of those things and make sure I get it finalized. I also decided not to demo doing all the container widths and padding for the sections and all those kinds of things. I had a feeling that might be kind of dull on the stream. So I want to go through and finish this starter site out, make sure everything's perfectly polished, and then put everything together. Now, the hard part comes with how can I package all this up and share it effectively? I would love to just use like all-in-one import, export, or not all-in-one import, the WP migrate plugin or whatever, to just export a file and let you import it. The problem with that is I have premium plugins in here that are installed and activated that I shouldn't just be giving out. So I can't really do that. And if I did that without the premium plugins installed and activated, then the whole thing would be screwed up even once you install and activate them on your end. So that idea is kind of out. So what I thought I could do is I can export the child theme as like a zip file that you can just import as your theme and then go in and make whatever tweaks you want. That would come with the override CSS file, the styles.css file, and the functions.php, which is a bunch of the stuff we did in here today. I can use the GeneratePress export to export the colors and the typography and all the customizer settings. So that would be a second file. I can export the GenerateBlocks global styles. So the section padding, the wrappers, anything else I come up with on that. Export that to allow you to import it. I can share the perf matters export that Brian shared. I can share an export of all the elements. So maybe I do go back in there. Let me know what you think, but go back in there and just design something really simple for our 404 and post page and archive template and all that kind of stuff. Or we could just leave those blank, but they're all in there. I could export that. So that's another file. I think we're up to 6 now. And then the WS form, I could also export that style where everything's already connected to my color system. And then at least you'd be able to, even though that's like 6 or 7 different files, at least you'd be able to just import the bits and pieces you need, but you'd still have to have a copy of GenerateBlocks Pro and this and that, perf matters and all that for all those things to be applicable. So I would also then probably have to make some kind of video that explains, here's how you download all the files. Here's how you need to set up your install. Here's how to import each one of these, because some are through the WordPress importer, some are through a specific tool like Perf Matters or WS Form. They're going to import things their own way. So there's probably like a 30-minute, 15-minute explainer video on how to do all that. So I would love to share all that. But between the time I spent prepping all of this and then an hour and 47 minutes on a live stream, and then I probably got a couple hours worth of work into this, I don't want to like sell a big thing for this. So what I decided to do was I'm going to get all this stuff put together, and then I'm going to publish it inside of our Barfly community. So all the Barfly members will get instant access to it. They don't have to pay anything extra for it. If you're not a Barfly member, I went an hour and a half, so allow me to pitch here. We'll go to, in fact, we're right here, community Barfly. So our Barfly community, you can think of it as like a Patreon community, essentially. Except we just don't use Patreon. It's $10 a month. It gets you access to our private Slack channel. It gets you access to our happy hour calls, which happen once a month, the first Friday of every month. Gets you access to our webinars, like next week, we have a webinar here with a lady named Layla from Process Driven. You might know her from YouTube. She's coming on to teach us about processes, but we've done lots of past webinars. In fact, earlier this week, we had a webinar with Amber Hines from Equalize Digital, where she taught us how to do screen reader testing, which was really interesting, but lots of things. You can go back and see the synopsis for all these. We do giveaways. In fact, somebody just won a giveaway today. Amy Hanley won a giveaway today, but we do 2 of these a month, so people are getting free prizes in there as well. There's a directory, so everybody that's a Barfly member, look, there's Shonda. Everybody that's a Barfly member can add themselves to our directory here. I post that directory in the admin bar anytime somebody's looking for help. Hey, I need help doing whatever. I just share this directory link. And the directory also goes inside the newsletter every week. So it says, over 160 professional developers, whatever, looking for help. So you get access to that as well. So if you want to join the Barfly community, you'll get access to the Slack group, all of our webinars, happy hours, the giveaways, being in the directory, and that's where I'm going to put all this Generate blocks, GeneratePress starter site stuff. So I was just trying to figure out what was the best way to do that, because it took so much time to put together, and I hate to, I'm going to have to spend any additional time on it. I wanted to get something out of it, but I didn't want to gouge everybody $50 or $100 or whatever to buy it. So I just thought if I include it in the Barfly community, maybe that gets some of you to come hang out with us there. If you don't want to stay around the Barfly community long, I guess you could just buy the starter site package once I have it done. Sign up for Barfly members for 1 month, immediately go in there and cancel. That will keep your subscription for the full month. You can go back and watch all the webinars. You can come hang out with us next week at the live webinar and our happy hour. I think it's 2 weeks from now. And then after a month, you'll be canceled out. You won't be billed anymore. You get everything for $10. So that's my pitch to you. I would love your support. I'd love for you to stick around longer than that. We got lots of cool, fun things happening, trying to pump a lot of stuff into that community every month. I very rarely ever talk about it here on YouTube. So that's my one little pitch for today. All right, we're about to get on here, or get out of here. How do you watch the recording of this webinar? I missed it. Will it be on YouTube? Same link you're on right now. Refresh this page. You can start from the very beginning. It will be there until the end of time at that same link. Sometimes YouTube will take it down as it kind of processes, or the live chat won't be available for a little bit, but this same link should have the entire replay on there. So if you don't want to buy the starter site, or you want to do yours completely different, you can rewatch this, fast forward, stop at the part you need to, and you don't have to pay for a penny of that. All right, awesome. I am super glad we had lots of people here. Held about 50 people the whole time. I appreciate y'all. Thanks for coming. Thanks for putting up with my now completely wrecked voice, my bit of coughing and chewing on a cough drop the whole time. I appreciate you putting up with that. Last week, I really wanted to do this, but last week I couldn't speak at all. So awesome. I hope everybody has a great weekend. Thanks for coming and hanging out with me today. If you have more questions, let me know. I will... I'll, of course, publish, when I publish the starter site, I'll promote that inside of our Barfly community. I'll make sure to come back and add those details, let everybody know when that's published, in case you want to come purchase that after the fact. I'll make sure everybody knows when that's published. Maybe post a community post on YouTube as well. As long as you're subscribed, you should see that. If you're not subscribed, an hour and 51 minutes in, let's subscribe. Let's thumbs up this video too. And I'll make sure everybody knows about that, so everybody can get their hands on that. I'm thinking sometime next week I'll have all that done and wrapped up and ready to go. So awesome. Are the calls always on your time? So the calls for the Barfly community, the webinars is usually when I'm bringing in a guest. So we kind of have to work around their time. Typically it's in like working hours of the US. The happy hour calls, I try to vary those up. So sometimes I do them at 10 o'clock in the morning here in the States, which makes it fairly early in the afternoon in Europe. Next month, I think 2 o'clock here in the eastern coast of the United States, which makes it a little bit easier on the West Coast folks or people in Hawaii or sometimes Asia, but it gets really hard with Australia, Asia, because we're just on opposite sides of the world. But I do try to vary those up quite a bit just so we can try to get as many people as involved as possible. But I only have a small area that I can do them to. So try to mix it up as best we can, but it's definitely not all hours of the day. So, all right. Hope everybody has an awesome weekend. Thanks for hanging out with me. We'll talk to you guys soon. All right. Bye-bye.